This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening, and we're telling you tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan's ruling party picks a new leader tomorrow, a race that could make history with the first female prime minister or the youngest, tasked with tackling soaring costs and tricky foreign policy. Beijing warns tourists in South Korea of a possible surge in anti-Chinese protests as Golden Week pushes overseas travel into overdrive. Marking 35 years of ties, Singapore leaders vow deeper cooperation with China, building on past partnerships, reaffirming free trade and developing digital and green economies. Hong Kong bracing for its 12th cyclone this year, a new record for Asia's financial hub as Typhoon Matmo moves closer from the Philippines. A T1 warning could be raised tonight and upgraded tomorrow. From heat waves to typhoons, extreme weather is hitting Hong Kong's green goals, and the city's environmentalists are worried. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party is set to vote for its next leader tomorrow. The elected person could take over as prime minister from Shigeru Ishiba, who announced his intention to step down last month, taking accountability for the LDP's poor showing in July's general election. Well, 5 contenders are in the running: Agriculture Minister Shinjiro Koizumi and former Economic Security Minister Sanae Takaichi, are widely seen as the leading choices by the party and the public. But whoever wins will face the mammoth task of pulling the LDP out of a political slump. They'll also have to deal with the tussle for influence between the US and China, the fallout from Donald Trump's tariffs and domestic concerns, including growing sentiment against immigration. Tomohiko Taniguchi, special advisor to the Fujitsu Future Studies Center and a specially appointed professor at the University of Tsukuba, weighs in on the bold steps both front-runners have pledged to take and how they could be constrained by coalition politics.
When it comes to the nation's diplomatic and national security policies, there does not seem to be a wide-ranging differences between the two. But when it comes to fiscal policies, Koizumi is for tighter fiscal policy and Takaichi for positive expansionary fiscal policy. So that's one of the dividing lines. When it comes to whether or not either one of those candidates could unite the LDP, it's a very difficult question, but soon, in the diet sessions that will convene and the next ordinary diet session that will start next January, the new government will have to form and forge a coalition with opposition parties on a very much ad hoc basis. So it will take sort of experienced leadership on the part of the new government's leader to make the parliament function. Only after that, the public will regain trust, if they will, about the LDP. There have been a very big number of debates and discussions among those 5 contenders, and differences of policies have remained more apparent and understandable for the general public to see. And you need to build political capital that's big enough to support those policy options. Whether they could, either one of them could work decisively is going to be dependent on what sort of victory the chosen candidate will have gained from the party members and also from the legislators with the LDP.
Well, one candidate, Yoshimasa Hayashi, stands out for having close ties with outgoing Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, for whom he served as government's chief spokesperson. Well, observers say the political heavyweight could emerge as a dark horse. CNA's senior correspondent Michief Ishida tells us more.
Yoshimasa Hayashi has held key posts under various Japanese premiers as Foreign, Defense, Agriculture, and Education Minister, and now as Chief Cabinet Secretary. His experience has earned him the nickname the 119 of politics, a reference to Japan's emergency number in his track record of being called on to replace scandal-hit ministers. This is the 64-year-old's third bid for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's presidency. In his first attempt in 2012, he came in last among 5 candidates. This time, the veteran politician is hoping his campaign pledge to balance stability and growth will resonate. But some political watchers say that as a key member of the Ishiba administration that led the LDP to a string of election losses, he should not have even entered the race.
政府与党全体でこの負うべき責任の中でも重いという意味で申し上げておりますが、この状況をなんとかこの乗り越えていかなければならないです。一つは先ほどご質問があった安全保障の問題でありますし、この半年はですね、トランプ政権との関税交渉、たくさんの課題があります。
Mr. Hayashi has positioned himself as a continuity candidate who, like Mr. Ishiba, prioritizes stable relation with China, while also seeking to strengthen Japan's alliance with the U.S. On economic policy, he has vowed to push for a sustained 1% wage hike in line with existing targets. Mr. Hayashi is the only one of the 5 candidates who has said he is willing to carry out the LDP's promise of uniform cash handouts to mitigate the rising cost of living, pledged in the lead-up to the upper house polls in July. He plans to work with the largest opposition, the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, to refine and push through the policy. One proposal that sets him apart is a Japanese version of universal credit, which would provide targeted support for low and middle-income households.
子育て世代なのか、単身世代なのか、老夫婦なのかと、これも見た上でですね、いわば一人一人の家計簿のような形でですね、このクレジットというものを作ってですね、どれぐらいのこの支援をしたらですね、いいのかということをやっていきたいと思っております。
Some observers say the ability to secure votes that went to Mr. Ishiba previously may decide the outcome of a closely contested race. And that if the 2 perceived frontrunners, Shinjiro Koizumi and Sanae Takaichi, make any major missteps, Mr. Hayashi has a chance to advance to a runoff and win the leadership of the ruling party and Japan. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Well, we have profiled 3 of the candidates who are seen as strong contenders to win the LDP leadership race. You can log on to cna.asia for related coverage. And also, we'll be getting more insights into the leadership campaign with Jesper Cole later this hour. He's a senior advisor at Wisdom Tree Investments. The Chinese embassy in South Korea has warned its citizens to stay vigilant as anti-China protests continue in Seoul. The embassy says that certain South Korean politicians have spread disinformation and far-right groups are staging anti-China demonstrations in areas where Chinese tourists gather. Beijing has asked the South Korean government to ensure the safety of Chinese citizens. Well, the demonstrations in Seoul come amid President Lee Jae-myung's efforts to reset ties with China that worsened under his predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. The latest protests also coincide with the 8-day Golden Week holiday in China, a peak travel period. South Korea started offering visa-free entry for Chinese tourists on Monday. But opposition groups raised concerns over security and public safety. Mr. Lee ordered a crackdown against anti-China rallies and other demonstrations against foreigners yesterday. He called them harmful, self-destructive acts that damage South Korea's national interest and image. Meanwhile, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is urging Pyongyang to consider resuming family reunions for those who were separated during the Korean War. Mr. Lee says that he hopes to ease hostility and resume cooperation, and that it was a political responsibility to allow the separated families to communicate at the very least. The South Korean leader said this at a meeting today with people who had fled from the north during the war. The Unification Ministry in Seoul says that about 36,000 people have requested to reunite with their loved ones in the north. Well, the last family reunion between the two Koreas were hosted 7 years ago, back in 2018, but stopped amid strained inter-Korean relations. In February, North Korea was seen tearing down a facility used for the gatherings. Now, Singapore leaders say they hope to deepen cooperation with China, building on the trust and partnerships forged by pioneer leaders. They reaffirm the commitment to work with China to uphold free trade, multilateralism, and a rules-based international order. The two countries are marking 35 years of diplomatic ties. In a letter to Chinese President Xi Jinping, Singapore President Tharman Shanmugaratnam expressed hope of elevating bilateral relations. He noted that cooperation expanded into new areas, such as the digital and green economies, as well as financial collaboration. President Tharman highlighted how people-to-people ties have grown stronger across generations. Now, in his letter to Chinese Premier Li Qiang, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said that the relationship has deepened over the years. PM Wong added that it was built on mutual trust and a willingness to understand each other's perspectives through decades of cooperation. Well, he hopes the two countries can explore new ways to support regional development and tackle shared challenges such as climate change. Singapore Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim-yong also wrote to Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang. He reflected on the deep friendships and mutual understanding over the years. DPM Gan said bilateral cooperation is supported by 3 government-to-government projects and a wide range of regular exchanges. Well, these helped expand ties, including new areas like the digital and green economies. Singapore Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan also sent a letter to his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to commemorate the anniversary. He added that Singapore and China share a common interest in supporting free trade, multilateralism, and a rules-based international order. He said both countries can do more together to benefit not only their people, but also the wider region. Time now for a break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, a cyber attack on Japan's biggest brewer is leaving retailers and investors thirsty for answers. We'll tell you how Asahi's shutdown is rippling across the country. China's TikTok in trouble again. Indonesia suspends the app's registration over missing data linked to live streams during protests. We'll look at what that means for its 100 million users. Hello again, you're watching East Asia tonight, and it is time to get you up to speed in business with Olivia Marzuki. So, Liv, let's talk about China and India. They're taking one more step towards rebuilding freight ties by resuming direct flights. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I'll tell you, the normalization of visa issuance, and that's after the resumption of the direct flights between the two countries, which actually comes after a 5-year-long hiatus, is seen as a big move by both economies. So direct flights between China and India had been halted during the COVID pandemic in 2020 and stayed grounded amid prolonged border tensions. India's embassy in Beijing says services between selected cities will restart by late October, depending on decisions made by airlines. Indigo, India's largest carrier, has announced flights from Kolkata to Guangzhou starting the 26th of October. The move follows Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first visit to China in 7 years to attend a regional security forum as part of efforts to normalize ties after deadly clashes along the Himalayan border 5 years ago. Airlines are now eyeing a rebound. In 2019, direct flights carried more than 45% of passenger flows between the two countries, with more than 500 scheduled services a month before the pandemic. Indonesia says it has suspended TikTok's registration status as an electronic system provider after the app failed to hand over all data relating to the use of its live stream feature. But it was unclear if access has been fully blocked. The Communications and Digital Affairs Ministry said some accounts with ties to online gambling activities used TikTok's live stream feature during recent national protests and monetized it. The authorities subsequently asked TikTok for its traffic, streaming, and monetization data. but the app only provided partial data, citing internal procedures. Government regulation stipulates that every company that has signed up to Indonesia's licensing rules must hand over its data for the purpose of supervision or risk being blocked. TikTok, which has more than 100 million accounts in Indonesia, temporarily suspended its live feature during the protests. Japan's unemployment rate rose to its highest in over a year, signaling a slight loosening of the labor market. And as Bank of Japan gives little away on when it would resume raising interest rates again. Unemployment rose to 2.6% in August from 2.3% the previous month, while August figures shows slight tempering of the job market. Data still points to a longer-term trend of companies pressured to raise wages to retain workers amid a lingering labor crunch. The job report comes ahead of the central bank's policy decision due out later this month. Stable wage gains along with steady inflation remain a key condition for the BOJ to stay on its gradual tightening path. Governor Kazuo Ueda warns that while inflation is on track to hit the bank's target, global uncertainties could discourage firms from raising wages. Meantime, chronic labor shortages are becoming a serious threat to business operations. Between January and August this year, 237 companies reportedly went bankrupt due to labor shortages. That's a 22% increase compared to the same period last year. And taps are running dry for Japan's largest brewer, Asahi, as the fallout from a cyber attack enters its fifth day with no resolution in sight. The company suspended its domestic operations on Monday after the incident crippled its order processing, shipping, and call center operations. Asahi has since resorted to handwritten orders. It also limited its product shipments, prioritizing food and soft drinks over alcoholic beverages. Across the country, convenience store chains such as Family Mart and 7-Eleven report being affected. Lawson says it is preparing to stock alternative products, while some restaurants have turned to rival beers to restock supplies. The cyber attack has also underscored the risks of corporate reliance on large integrated IT systems. Experts flag how a single incident can now bring sweeping disruption. The country's top government spokesperson says enhancing the country's cyber response capabilities is an urgent priority.
政府といたしましては、今後ともサイバー空間の状況把握に努めまして、脅威の動向に応じた対策について、注意喚起を行うなど、さまざまな施策を通じまして、サイバーセキュリティ対策を推進してまいります。
Well, in stock trade, investor sentiment has soured. Asahi shares sank further today, extending this week's losses, while Sapporo and Suntory advanced more than 3.5% for Sapporo. ChatGPT owner OpenAI is said to have overtaken Elon Musk's SpaceX as the world's most valuable startup. And that's following reports that it has completed a share sale, which values the company at $500 billion. Current and former employees of OpenAI have reportedly sold about $6.6 billion worth of stock to investors. And that, in turn, boosted the firm's price tag well above the previous $300 billion level during a SoftBank-led financing round earlier this year. Reports say the new investments came from the likes of SoftBank and Abu Dhabi's MGX. It is the latest sign of the intense appetite for exposure to AI as investors pile into prominent startups. And it also comes as major tech giants battle over the world's top AI talent with major compensation packages. The fresh funds for OpenAI also signal confidence in a company that has yet turned to profit, betting on its future AI potential. AI and also Asia is racing to adopt generative AI, which is the technology that's not only revolutionizing how we learn and connect, but also how we create and innovate. But where does the region stand, and what challenges lie ahead? CNA's Rani Samtani spoke to industry leaders and policymakers at the Milken Institute Asia Summit to find out more.
From China to Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and India, AI's rise in Asia is reshaping economies in real time.
Asia is at the forefront of adopting AI across a range of industries. We're seeing it particularly in areas like financial services, in healthcare, public sector, etc.
We also work with enterprise and governments on deploying AI to address societal needs. Like Japan is a declining population with a declining workforce, and I think AI cannot solve all the problems in Japan, but it can help. And we're working with some of the largest enterprises in Japan to deploy AI workflow solutions, making to complement, not replace staff in Japan.
Artificial intelligence is expected to transform the public and private sectors in Southeast Asia, with some estimates suggesting it will add nearly $1 trillion to the region's GDP by 2030.
AI is being applied on the other side to real-world problems. Like any other new technology, right? There's a lot of experimentation going on. But getting AI into real world, real business outcomes, and with a tangible proof point, I think that's the biggest, challenge.
There's a lot more that we can learn, especially from Australia or from the US in terms of adopting AI. AI is a big term, and there's a lot in it. There is like your infrastructure layer, there is your tooling layer, and there's also your application layer. And I think the greatest challenge is helping people understand all these different layers in the AI ecosystem and understanding how they can use them, whether in the personal life or in the professional life.
As with any new technology, there are concerns that the power of AI can be used in harmful ways.
AI tools are used every day to produce images or even the narrative online to manipulate populations to think a certain way. And what we're working with the government in Japan as well is also in pilot projects to detect misinformation on social media, detect images or videos that were generated using the latest AI models, so that we can decrease instances of this manipulation, perhaps at scale, by other state actors. This is kind of critical in times of even the elections coming up in Japan as well.
It is so important that we have a clear regulatory environment, because when AI is used for good, it's fantastic. But when there are inbuilt biases or issues around the ethical use of AI, we're seeing, unfortunately, a big growth in things like deep fakes. This is a real problem, so it's super important that we have a strong governance model around the use.
Some governments across Asia have been taking a wait-and-see approach to regulation, issuing frameworks and guidelines instead of binding rules on AI. That's especially because the technology is constantly evolving. Many in the public and private sector have been focusing on boosting investment and capabilities in AI, in particular when it comes to upskilling and training. Rani Samtani, CNA, Singapore.
And that's all I have in business for you. I'll tell you back.
Thanks so very much, as usual, Olivia. All right, guess it's time for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan's ruling party will pick a new leader tomorrow, and the winner could officially take over as prime minister from Shigeru Ishiba as early as mid-October. We'll get the latest analysis from Japan expert Jesper Cole. Taiwan and the Philippines separately saying they're keeping a close watch on Chinese activity in their waters. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party picks a new leader tomorrow. Could the election produce the country's first female prime minister or its youngest leader ever? Beijing warns its nationals in South Korea as anti-China protests break out in Seoul, while holidaymakers are out in force for Golden Week. And Hong Kong is bracing for a 12th cyclone this year, a new record for the city. Typhoon Matmo is closing in this weekend after battering the Philippines. Now, as mentioned, Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party will be choosing its next leader tomorrow. The elected person could take over as prime minister from Shigeru Ishiba, who announced his intention to step down last month. 5 contenders are in the running. Agriculture Minister Shinjiro Koizumi and former Economic Security Minister Sanae Takaichi are widely seen as the leading choices by the party and the public. Now, for more insights, let's bring in Jesper Cole, Senior Advisor with Wisdom Tree Investment, and he is speaking to us all the way from Tokyo. Well, thanks, Jesper, for joining us this evening. I'm going to kick things off with the big picture first. On the eve of this ballot, now everybody's going to be watching the front runners closely, but what about the unexpected, Jesper? What is one possible outcome that you think isn't getting enough attention but could actually happen?
Hayashi, the current chief cabinet spokesman, he's generally a dove, and he is very, very highly regarded within the LDP parliamentary section. So when you think about it, you've got 5 candidates, and there is ultimately 3 more right-wing nationalist candidates that could very well leave open the room for a surprise Mr. Hayashi.
Right, from dove to a lame duck that you have mentioned in one of your articles, saying that the next prime minister could possibly be one from the start, depending on, I guess, coalition horse trading, as you've mentioned. But why do you think that is the case, and do you still foresee that happening?
Look, the key issue is who actually controls the policy agenda. And it's very clear that right after Abe stepped down, including the current government of Mr. Ishiba, the agenda is entirely controlled by the elite bureaucracy. And when you look at the candidates, you find that there's only one, namely Miss Takaichi, who actually has a mind of her own, while everybody else has been basically co-opted by the elite bureaucracy, which means that it's a steady state, nothing exciting going to happen. With Takaichi, she's got a mind of her own, exciting things could happen.
So Takaichi and Koizumi, they have very different qualities that they'll be bringing to the table in terms of the role of a prime minister. So who's your money on?
I personally think that Ms. Takaichi, is a real fighter. And she has fought very hard to get to where she is today. She's won the hearts and the minds of a lot of the LDP establishment, which, as you know, is basically a male-dominated clique, of politicians. Takaichi has fought her way up because she's proven that she's better than most of the men. So from that perspective, I think that she's the fighter. She deserves the job.
But what do you think is going to stand in her way of actually being elected?
The key question is the LDP elders do want to have, somebody who they're comfortable with, somebody that they can control, rather than somebody who has an independent mind like Miss Takaichi. So young Koizumi, has got this global image of, he's he's going to be a reformer, but he's a bit like, Trudeau in Canada, in the sense of that he was born with a silver spoon, as it were, in his mouth. His father, obviously, a very, very successful and powerful prime minister, but he himself, for all intents and purposes, does not really have any specific convictions of where he wants to take the country. And as a result of that, the LDP establishment has now co-opted him because he basically will sing their tune, rather than Takaichi, who basically sings her own tune.
So, but, whoever takes the top job isn't just going to be facing domestic challenges. There are also international ones as well. And the Trump factor, let's just bring that in. How do you think, Japan has to deal with a very unpredictable U.S. president back in the White House. How much of that is going to be a factor, you think? And do you think who's going to be the most suitable candidate to lead Japan's diplomacy?
Look at the reality. The reality is that Takaichi is the only one who basically said, well, this trade agreement, the 15% tariffs, and the $550 billion of investment, that's unfair. That's not, a fair treaty, because the $550 billion investments are entirely directed by the president. And if Japan were not to participate, the president has the right to impose additional tariffs. Takaichi is the only one who speaks up for Japan and says, well, no, this is not a fair treaty. And from that perspective, again, it is this self-determination that Japan is craving right now. Whether or not they're going to win against Mr. Trump is a completely different story. The question is, do you just roll over and kiss the ring, or do you actually stand up? Takaichi stands up.
And you think Ms. Takaichi would also, when it comes to managing alliance, aside from the U.S., whether it's with China and South Korea, would be able to handle those aspects as well?
I think, again, she's been very clear that she wants to get on a plane once a month, to visit countries in Indo-Pacific. As you know, Japan has good relations, even with the People's Republic of China, given that China is Japan's largest trading partner. There's a lot of exchange going on. 1/3 of the students in graduate school here are basically Chinese national. So, Takaichi is actually proactive, is not just proactive towards Asia-Pacific. She wants to forge closer alliances, more trust between Japan and Asia-Pacific, including China, rather than just bowing to the United States.
So despite all these political headwinds, Jesper, you've remained optimistic about Japan's long-term role in Asia. You've called it the headquarters nation of Asia. Do you still stand by that vision in the event that the country ends up with a prime minister that is not Ms. Takaichi?
Oh, look, I think politics is ultimately, a little bit overrated, particularly here in Japan, given that the business elite and the bureaucratic elite is just so very strong and very determined. And Japan as a headquarters nation in Asia is extremely attractive. And that's true whether you're a European company, whether you're an American company. Japan has got a rock solid rule of law, has got a rock solid bureaucracy and regulatory regime. And now, given the yen's depreciation, Japan is unbelievably attractive in terms of affordability. And the bonus point is that you can now hire top talent here in Japan because everybody wants to live in Tokyo.
Right. Good to know, including yourself. Thanks so very much for your time and thoughts, Jesper Cole in Tokyo, Senior Advisor with Wisdom Tree Investments. Turning our attention to other news now, the U.S. State Department has brushed off China's warning not to interfere in the affairs of Hong Kong. Now, China's top diplomat in the city had lodged a protest with American Consul General Julie Ide, asking her to stop colluding with anti-China forces. Washington responded with a statement yesterday saying that its diplomats are charged with advancing U.S. interests globally, which is standard practice around the world, including in Hong Kong. A Chinese diplomat, Cui Tianchun, had warned the recently appointed American Consul General not to interfere with the city's national security cases and not to undermine the territory's stability. Now, China had taken issue with Ms. Ide's actions back in 2019 during the first administration of U.S. President Donald Trump. She was then with the consulate's political section and was seen talking with student leaders at a hotel when the city was rocked by anti-government protests. Well, another break's up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, we look at the concerns that Hong Kong may not be able to meet its climate action goals this year. And a new attraction at South Korea's largest theme park brings Netflix smash hit Kpop Demon Hunters to life. Taiwan's defense chief says that they are tracking Chinese activities for early signs of possible war games, but can't confirm if there will be a repeat of last year's drills that were held around Taiwan's Double 10 Day. Double 10 stands for the 10th of October, which commemorates the founding of the Republic of China. Beijing staged a day of war games around the island last year, shortly after Taiwan's celebrations. Beijing had called it a warning to, quote, separatist acts. Meantime, Taiwan Defense Minister Wellington Koo told reporters in Parliament today that they will monitor developments and respond accordingly. Well, the Philippines as well said that it is monitoring the actions of the Chinese military. Manila has its focus on the contested Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea, where Beijing had recently announced plans to set up a nature reserve. Well, Manila last month called Beijing's move a, quote, clear pretext for occupation. The Philippine Armed Forces Chief General Romeo Brawner said that Manila will not allow what happened at Mischief Reef to be repeated at the Scarborough Shoal. The Philippines claims Mischief Reef, which sits within its exclusive economic zone. Well, China has occupied the reef since the 1990s and built a military base there. Beijing has yet to respond to the Philippines, but has stepped up sea and air patrols this week around Scarborough Shoal, which it calls Huangyuan Island. Typhoon Matmo crosses the Philippines, weakening slightly but still remaining a threat. Authorities warn of heavy downpours, strong winds and flooding risk in low-lying areas. Well, the storm made landfall on the Philippines' eastern coast early this morning, packing winds of up to 130 kilometers per hour. Residents in some flood and landslide-prone villages were seen evacuating. Provincial and local governments have also suspended classes and work, and vessels are banned from entering the rough seas. The storm comes after a deadly earthquake earlier this week and 2 other recent storms, complicating its disaster response. Matmo is the 16th tropical cyclone to hit the Philippines this year. And it appears the storm is now making its way to southern China, expected to enter within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong later today. The Hong Kong Observatory says that it will consider issuing the number 1 typhoon standby signal. Matmo looks set to become the 12th typhoon hitting Hong Kong this year, a record since 1946. Scientists from Imperial College London say that climate change had significantly worsened the impact of Super Typhoon Ragasa. The storm, which made landfall about a week ago in southern China, is the most powerful recorded this year. Researchers say about a third of the damage caused by the typhoon is due to a warming Earth. Climate change, primarily caused by the burning of fossil fuels, is estimated to have boosted the storm's winds by 7% and rainfall by 12% at the time of landfall. Ralph Toomey, the director of Imperial's Grantham Institute, said that China has prepared well for Ragasa, but more powerful storms in the future could still cause extensive damage, regardless of a country's state of readiness. Super Typhoon Ragasa, at its height, packed winds of more than 260 kilometers per hour. The storm prompted mass evacuations as it flooded streets, wrecked homes and property in southern China. Before that, it killed dozens as it swept through the Philippines and Taiwan. Well, more intense weather could spell problems for Hong Kong's green goals, and that's triggering worries that the targets for its 2050 action plan may not be met. CNA's senior correspondent Mei Wong explains.
No space to plant more trees to reduce carbon emissions? No problem. These algae walls will do.
Compared to trees, where they can capture around 10 to 30 kg of CO2 per year, our algae wall can capture around 329 kg of CO2 per year, which is much more than planting trees. Our targeted customers are the heavy industry, for example, manufacturing, power supply company, and logistic companies where they emit a lot of carbon dioxide. So we target those companies because they are the main source of the carbon emission, and we want to try to help them to tackle these challenges.
The vulnerability of Hong Kong to typhoons and rainstorms will also not affect these algae panels, unlike trees which can be uprooted. For the first 8 months of this year, the city has already experienced about 4 typhoons compared to 0 in the same period last year. That's on top of a regular typhoon season annually from June to October. Apart from that, Hong Kong is also seeing rising temperatures, which will only get worse with growing global greenhouse gas emissions.
Based on like a wide range of assumptions about greenhouse gas emissions in the future, the summertime average temperature would increase by about 1 to 3 Celsius degree for Hong Kong. And if we further consider the impacts of humidity, these numbers can be greater, about 1.6 to 3.5 Celsius degree for Hong Kong. That's a huge change.
The Hong Kong government's target is for renewable energy to account for up to 10% of electricity generation within 10 years. But according to the latest government statistics in 2022, renewables only accounted for 0.8% of 60% of electricity consumption. Some observers are not optimistic the government's targets will be achieved.
We don't even see any particular measures or particular policy in the building energy code or in the new building requirements that need the developers to really inbuild the renewable energy supply within their new infrastructures or buildings.
Hong Kong is undertaking a massive development project in the north. Such large areas of green spaces will soon have to make way for development here. And some are hoping that the authorities can make a more deliberate effort to take this opportunity to build eco-friendly projects over here. That means constructing green buildings that'll end up consuming less energy. This kind of an eco-friendly project can then be used as a role model for future urban development right here in Hong Kong. The government has included nature protection projects like a wetland conservation park as part of the Northern Metropolis development, but specific details remain scarce. Environmentalists hope green measures will be integrated throughout the entire Northern Metropolis project.
For any new build or infrastructure project, they must bear in mind this net zero concept, which is when they plan it, they've already taken into consideration the whole life cycle approach, and they make sure that they will be resilient to the vulnerability. And then for the nature side, which could be an ally for combating climate change, we hope that all the new development will have no or zero extinctions of any nature.
Urban development doesn't have to come at the cost of environmental protection, and achieving both will help the city of 7.5 million step up as a responsible international player in combating global warming for a more sustainable future. May Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
Now, a Chinese company is starting a trial to submerge power-hungry data centers underwater to lower cooling costs and solve the energy woes of computing. Well, the firm has identified a spot in waters off financial hub Shanghai, believing that they can be kept at a low temperature by ocean currents and shave off an estimated 90% of energy needs. To keep components dry and safe from salt water corrosion, a special protective coating is used on components, which are then encased in a steel capsule. Existing methods on land involve energy-intensive air cooling or water evaporation. Microsoft first trialled undersea servers off the coast of Scotland a few years ago. But the Chinese project, to be sunk later this month, is one of the first commercial services of its kind. It will serve clients such as China Telecom and a state-owned AI computing firm. South Korea's largest theme park is drawing big crowds with a new attraction based on Netflix hit animation Kpop Demon Hunters. Well, hundreds of visitors lined up to step inside Everland's latest theme zone, greeted by colorful sets and the film's bright blue tiger character, Derpy. Young fans posed for photos dressed as their favorite idols, while others tried shooting and dance rhythm games inspired by the movie.
제가 좋아하는 캐릭터 영광이기 때문에 왔어요. 그리고 제가 여기서 제일 재밌었던 거는 의상 입고 사진 찍었던 게 제일 재밌었어요.
제 여자친구가 이거 뭐지? 캐데몬? 이걸 좋아해가지고 어저께 이제 같이 영화도 넷플릭스에서 같이 영상도 보고 그다음에 또 에버랜드에서 이런 행사를 한다고 하길래 같이 이렇게 놀러 왔습니다.
K-pop Demon Hunters is about three idols moonlighting as demon fighters. After topping Netflix all-time movie chart in August, the musical fantasy has now logged 15 straight weeks in the global top 10, the longest run ever for an English-language film on the platform. Could there be a side hustle that turns waste into wealth and possibly pay the equivalent of a full-time job? Well, CNA's Money Mind speaks to a bubble tea fan whose upcycling efforts have turned into a rewarding pursuit.
This handmade lantern looks like it could have been sculpted from a precious gemstone. But what looks like treasure actually comes from discarded bubble tea packaging. They're the handiwork of 41-year-old Guangzhou fashion designer Chong Chong, who turns waste into wealth. Like many Chinese consumers, she loves bubble tea, but she was unhappy with the plastic waste it left behind. Then, by chance, she used a leftover cup for a craft project for her child.
我第一次制作这个奶茶杯灯笼手工的时候是2023年，那个时候我孩子是在上幼儿园，幼儿园的时候学校里面都会布置那个手工作业，然后这个时候我就在想，哎，好像奶茶杯做灯笼好像也不错。
Each project starts with bubble tea packaging. She then adds extra materials, which can cost up to $28.
当时做出来的那个灯笼呢，我也是随机拍了一下，发到小红书，然后反应挺好的。当时的全网的点击量应该有100万以上。我就在想，哎，是不是这个事情我可以做一下？也是的。然后我觉得做完以后，我就特别喜欢。
Going viral on social media doesn't guarantee instant monetary payoff.
这个赚不了很多，就是如果是光光卖成品是赚不到很多钱的。哦，对，可以收支平衡没问题。
But going viral did open up a new income stream. Her craft works caught the attention of bubble tea brands. That meant she no longer needed to pay to get her hands on bubble tea cups and paper bags. Instead, they were the ones paying her to transform their products into works of art. Each project takes 3 to 5 days to complete. She's now worked with around 30 bubble tea brands and takes on over half a dozen projects every month.
目前来讲的话呢，一个月的话啊，可能1万块钱左右是可以的。
It's almost as much as the average starting salary for fresh graduates in China's major cities.
这个对于我来说，我就觉得这个钱跟我平时拿的工资感觉不一样，所以我就会把这个钱可能会单独放在一个账号里，可能我会去购买其他的材料，还有再就是这一个的话，会作为我们家宝贝的一个教育基金。
For the full Bubble Tea Treasure Money Mind segment, do log on to YouTube, MeWatch, and our website, cna.asia, for other Money Mind segments. And that's all we've got for you for this Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.